Here is a quick overview of Scrum as it pertains to businesses. Scrum was originally developed for software and product development, and this is how I've adapted it for business. So first of all, just take a look down here. You can see this is day number. So day number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. And that together will be a sprint. So these are business days. So 10 business days equals 2 weeks. And a typical sprint will be between 2 to 4 weeks usually. If it's a real short, intense burst, it might be only 1 week. And usually you're not doing much more than 4 weeks. So this is kind of sprint 1, and then this right here is sprint 2. And so more or less you've got 4 weeks represented here on this infographic. So now, secondly, you'll also notice that basically this right here, this is Scrum, and then this is just repeated a second time right here, and then it would continue a third time, up here, and it stacks and stacks and stacks over time. Okay, so let's get all this drawing off the screen here. Okay, so the second thing for you to know is that there's kind of 2 tracks here. So first of all, leadership is in green right here. So everything that's green, so this right here, that right there, this is kind of the leadership, or the green path is in here. And then secondly, we have a different track, which is team of talent. And so anything that you see in these blue circles here, all of that is your team of talent. So let's say, for example, we're designing a website, then the leadership might be the account manager, and the team of talent would be the graphic designer, the coder, the copywriters, the photographers, that kind of thing. If we were talking about, say, a booking agency that books talent, then this would be your booking agents, your travel coordinators, and then the manager of the agency would be on the leadership side, right? So whatever the business is, you've got the people that are really doing the work, and then we've got the managers, executives, and leaders who are really leading the work. Okay, so that's the second thing to know. Next thing to know is that what we're seeing here is these are actually meetings. So this is a bigger circle because it's a bigger, longer meeting. And then these are little baby meetings. And then we've got a medium-sized meeting. So as you can tell, this is half blue, half green because it's the team of talent and the leadership participate in this meeting. This is just the team of talent, just the team of talent, just the team of talent, just the team of talent. And then this is just leadership. Next thing for you to know is that there's a couple lists of tasks or software that are going to exist. This could be a Trello board, Teamwork, Asana, Podio, any of the project management tools. And so we have an overall backlog that lives inside of your project management system, and then we have a sprint backlog. And as you can see, the sprint backlog is much bigger and the sprint backlog is much smaller. Okay, and then ultimately all of this is so that we can produce what's called shippable product. Now, shippable product is defined more or less as something that you can complete that your end users would be able to see, touch, taste, hear, view, experience. So for example, if we're building a website, if we did if we did the photography for one page, the coding of another, the copy of a third, it'd be real tough to put anything into a customer or a prospective customer's hands to get their feedback on it. And so instead, we should take the photographer and the graphic designer and the coder and get them to all work together to build just that first page. Because now that that first page is complete, even though not the whole website is complete, we have enough of what could be put in the customer's hands here for them to give us feedback, to say, oh, the pictures are confusing, or the navigation is clunky, or this website is ugly, or what, or it's great, or I love these 3 things but not this other thing. Like, getting product out the door is such a huge deal. And so, and that applies whether it's a product or a service. And that actually also applies whether it's to an external user, like a customer or an investor or a patient, right? And it also applies if it's an internal customer. So an internal user or customer for us would be our own teammates, right? So maybe, let's say that I'll use the website company again as an example. Let's say that something we identify as an idea is to create like a design brief. Right? So this is like a template standard of 12 questions and a checklist of 15 steps that we're going to have our internal teammates use when they're out in the field. And that will really help increase the speed and the efficiency internally of our team. And so we may decide, hey, we're going to go build that during the sprint. And then at this point here, when we do what's called the demo meeting, the internal team members can say, oh, hey, looking at this design brief or looking at this checklist, I think this could work. I would change this. I would add that. I would delete this, right? And now we can actually put something in their hands for them to give us feedback. If it's a booking agency, say you book speakers to speak all over the place, maybe it's like, here's the pregame checklist that we're thinking of using. And so you show it to your team who does the bookings, and they'll give you feedback on it, for you to then go back to work or release it to the team to actually use or whatnot. Okay, so those are kind of some of the features of Scrum. Now let's talk about how we actually move through it. So we'll start with actually the very, very, very beginning. So if this is your first time ever using Scrum for business, start right here. And to quick start is literally just to brain dump. What are all the tasks, projects, ideas that you have, and just brain dump those things into your overall backlog. So, I mean, that could be a Google Doc with a list of ideas. It could be a Google Sheet. It could be into a column on Trello called Inbox. If you're using OmniFocus, it could go into the Inbox. If you're using Teamwork PM, you could create a project called Inbox. You're basically just like looking to brain dump everything and anything to get us to empty. So once that brain dump is complete, then we're going to take a look at the overall backlog, and we're going to start prioritizing what appears to be what's going to give us the biggest value the quickest, right? And I think that it's important to just keep your goals in mind, because there's such thing as a good idea at a bad time. And sometimes just doing the right thing at the right time can be more important than doing the most glitzy, glammy, or exciting thing at the right time. So really be clear about what's going to get us closest to our goal, and really what shippable product can we produce to make that happen. So as we identify our priorities, then we're going to unpack those priorities, right? And so maybe we are building a website, and in the next 2 weeks, there's no way that we could build a website. And maybe it even feels impossible to build one page of a website. So let's unpack that even more. And let's say we just got to come up with a new brand identity. And maybe we go, brand identity. Okay, that we can get done in 2 weeks. So we need to unpack whatever it is we want to get done into what is the shippable product that we can get done in the next 2 weeks. So we've now moved from brain dump, which puts things into the overall backlog. We've now unpacked it so that we can say, all right, this is going to become our sprint backlog. We finalize that in our sprint planning meeting, right? So at the end of that sprint planning meeting, we've got our sprint backlog committed to. What are we going to get done in the next 2 weeks? And along the way, as we're defining our sprint backlog, we want to be real clear about our definition of done. So definition of done is, how do we know that it's complete, right? So for example, if it's the website example, might be like, the definition of done is a customer could come in and, they could find out what hours our business is open because the contact page has our appointments. Or maybe it's like, maybe not the whole website is done, but the booking page is done to the point that a customer could come in and actually book in for a fitness class, right? In the case of the speaking agency, definition of done is something like our speaker shows up at stage, all the AV that they need is there on the side stage on a little table that they can walk up, not have to think about it before that moment, and 10 minutes before they go on stage, get hooked up with their lav mic, the clicker gets put in their hand, the slides are already all loaded up, and the speaker can just stroll on stage, right? Something like that. Okay, so once you've kind of figured out, oftentimes whoever's involved, whoever the team of talent is, whoever's the ones who actually have to go do the work, we oftentimes want to have them have some say on what gets committed to in the sprint backlog. And that's a good idea for a lot of reasons, including the fact that people usually support what they help create. I heard Jack Stack say that many times a few years ago when I was studying with him. And it also helps them to not only feel included, but for them to have a voice. Because if you want them to get something done that in their brains are like, there's no way that we can get that done, you might have a fight on your hands. Likewise, if you think, oh, let's go do this, and in their mind they're like, oh, this is a breeze, then you might be missing out on productivity. So we need to find that right kind of work size that everyone can agree to. Okay, great. So now that we've got all that committed to, then what's going to happen is we're going to get to work, right? And so the sprint planning happens here. And that's where we come up with our sprint backlog. And a lot of teams will do a stand-up every morning. This stand-up is short. It's like 1 minute or less per person. Usually a Scrum team is no more than 9 people on the highest side. Usually around 7 is usually the balance. Much less, some people actually do Scrum with themselves. There's a lot of possible jokes there, so we'll just step over that. That people use Scrum project management with themselves. And they'll do a morning stand-up, or sometimes they have an accountability buddy if they've got, someone from another business that, if they're both solo entrepreneurs, for example. And so I've done this myself many, many times. And that's one way that Scrum for Business can be different is if you're a small business owner, sometimes you don't even have 7 people on your team, right? So I think to be mindful of is if you've got more than 9 people on your team, you'd want to break it into multiple teams, or else the morning stand-ups start getting messy. Some of the backlog grooming work gets messy, and you can really start losing a bunch of time. So in these morning stand-ups, you can see they're just little circles. So that's, they're like probably less than 10 minutes, even possibly less than 5 minutes. And the stand-up format is right here. So each person just answers, what have you done since our last meeting, which might be as recent as yesterday? What roadblocks and bottlenecks have you run into? And what will you get done before our next meeting, which quite possibly is the next day or maybe 2 days later? In a small business, it could be that having a stand-up every single morning is too much. But maybe every 2 days makes more sense, right? And then every 2 days, and then every 2 days, and then every 2 days. So it's about finding the version of Scrum that works best for you. Okay, so as the team is working, they're working towards that definition of done. They're knocking things off the sprint backlog. And each morning they're doing their stand-ups to get things done. Now, as they're working along, they're going to probably use some version of what's called a Kanban board. And this is where a tool like Trello is really common because it's already set up to be used like a Kanban board. So the first column is, my drawing tool is getting a little finicky here. So this is to do. This right here is doing. And then this right here is done. And good old Post-it notes can be used if you're doing this on the wall of your business, or if it's a Trello card, you can do it virtually. And then as things get put into play, then the card goes into play, and the owner of that card will usually put their initials in the corner. Tools like Trello or MeisterTask allow you to actually put a name on each card. And then as it's getting completed, it gets moved across. And again, that's to do, doing, and done. And by having that visible to everyone on the team, including the leadership, can see what kind of progress are we making on this specific sprint. So around the second last day, third last day of the sprint, the leadership is, and maybe not like everyone on the leadership team of the business, but whoever's leading this Scrum process is going to do something on day 8, day 9, somewhere in there, that they're going to do some backlog grooming. So they're going to take a look at the Kanban board right here, which is the same, which is how we make the sprint backlog come to life, is we populate a Kanban board. And so the Scrum Master, the product owner here, will actually look at the sprint backlog. They'll take a look at the Kanban board, see like what's our progress like. They'll take a look at the overall backlog, see if there's other projects or tasks that we need to be getting on. They might even be looking at the calendar to see what's our timeline of what's coming down the pipe in terms of deadlines. And at this point, the leader, who sometimes is called different things, it might, depending on the size of your team, it might have a Scrum Master or a product owner doing that work. They would kind of come up with like probably about whoops, my drawing tool is a little finicky, 70% maybe to 80% idea of probably what the team needs to get done in the next sprint. So it's not 100% certainty, but it's kind of like a pretty good educated insight into probably at least approximately what needs to get done. So that's kind of running in the background while the team of talent is doing their thing. So then there's a very special time that comes up next. And what that is what's called our demo and our retro. So this one right here, this is called backlog grooming, right? Is this meeting right here. And then at the end of the sprint, we have something called a demo and a retro. And in some businesses, it actually doesn't make a ton of sense to have everyone involved in this, or maybe everyone involved in every demo. But the idea is to do two parts of this meeting. And so the first part is that we can actually put the end product in the hand of one of our users to get their feedback. And that can be really powerful if you're developing some kind of new product, whether that's internally for internal users or externally. Now, that may not make sense all the time to have a demo, but certainly what I think probably always makes sense is to have some kind of a retro. So that's a short way of saying a retrospective. And so anybody who's involved with the Scrum team will participate in the retro, and you'll be taking a look at questions like what worked, what didn't work over the course of the sprint, what improvements could we make, what new ideas have come up, and to take a look at people, projects, process, and uncover what are some improvements. And some of those improvements will go straight into the sprint backlog. They might end up on the overall backlog, and or they might just be little to-dos that we end up putting into place very quickly, and it doesn't even take more than 10 minutes to do. So a very quick example of something that probably wouldn't even end up on your backlog is like, let's say someone says, hey, I was really wanting to build the website, but I got bottlenecked because I didn't have access to our stock photo account on iStock Photo or Getty Images or wherever. And so that might be as simple as someone on the leadership going, oh yeah, I'll just send you LastPass. I'll LastPass you the login information. And so that gets done in 3 minutes. And now that doesn't even have to hit the overall backlog or the sprint backlog for the next sprint. So as this meeting is happening here, we're seeing what the shippable product is. We're demoing it, right? So we're demoing the shippable product. Then from there, we're also having a team retro for the second half of that meeting. Just like this meeting is probably 60 to 90 minutes, this meeting here is also likely 60 to 90 minutes. And all of that tees us up to end the week and then to begin the next sprint on the next, maybe it's a Monday that you start your sprint. And now we're right back at it. And guess what? This meeting that we had here to come up with the 70 to 80% idea of what the next sprint's going to look like is going to inform this meeting. The shippable product, the state of where it's at is going to inform where do we want to be at the next sprint. And so that'll also inform what we do here. And then our demo and retro, whatever we learn here will also help inform this next meeting. And so as you get into doing Scrum more and more, and you've got, you've done it for 10, 15, 20 cycles, everyone will know the flow, and it's very, very powerful. So this is a very basic version of Scrum. Maybe the one other thing I'll add is sometimes it's helpful during these sprint planning meetings is to kind of forecast how much work it's going to take. Again, we get rewarded for projects completed, not projects started. And so it can be very tempting to say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. And if we're spread too thin across too many projects, we actually never do accomplish the shippable product. So it can be tough. There can be some tough decisions, and some tough decisions get made here. But that integrity of thought, that discipline to kind of matching what's possible with the team of talent, the amount of time they've got, and what customers are looking for. Like some of those front-loaded decisions can make a huge difference down the road, and it's worth sometimes having some of the tough chats in the beginning of the sprint so that the rest of the sprint can be real smooth. So that is a quick overview of Scrum for business. Hopefully that's incredibly helpful. And if you have any questions, you can certainly get with us and we can help you out. Thank you so much.